Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. My name is Katrina and this is I wanted to do a really short video about rating nonfiction books. Ratings have been on my mind because I just learned about a rating system that I'm going to be trying for a little bit and see if it helps me review books better or talk about books better. Again, I'm not a reviewer. But I've heard multiple people say that they don't rate nonfiction, and I think that's interesting because I do. And so I understand that some people feel that they're not they don't want to knock someone's scholarly work, but if someone there's a theologist that I follow and I love him, and he will write a book that is specifically meant for his colleagues, and then he'll write a popular version of that book. So the popular version should still be engaging as well as give me the information, and it won't have as many footnotes and things like that, but it'll still give me some other documents that I can look up and things like that. But it still needs to be engaging, because if it's not engaging, I'm not going to want to read it. So the last book that I read like that was They Were Her Property. So the book that I'm talking about is They Were Her Property, White Women as Slave Owners in the American South by Stephanie E. Jones Rogers. And I didn't finish the book. I think I'm going to go back and listen to it eventually, maybe for just to know. But I read, I think, like over half of the book, and it was just like, okay, I get it. The women own the property just as much as the men did. We have a misunderstanding, and it was like court case after court case after court case that she was presenting to back up her claim. And I was like, okay, we get it. Let's move on to the next point that you have. And it was very dry to me. And in the same vein, The Half Has Never Been Told: Slavery and the Making of American Capitalism by Edward E. Baptist was incredibly engrossing. And now, I don't know if the fact that I read this book years ago has something to do with the fact that I thought this book was so revolutionary versus They Were Her Slaves, because I've read so many books since then. At the time, if you're a well-read Black person, if you are paying attention, your history. I know my history. I seek it out. Obviously, I didn't learn it in American school systems, but I seek it out. Let me read you one of my favorite James Baldwin quotes. It's going to come up a couple more times in some future videos, but this is me when it comes to my thirst for knowledge and being Black in America. So here's the quote. To be Negro in this country and to be relatively conscious is to be in a rage almost all the time. That's me. And so maybe The Half That Has Never Been Told was so powerful to me because it was a different point of view. And I don't know. I don't think so, because it's two totally different things. And there's things that I'm reading now about the prison system that are giving me literal chills, where I have to put the book down, read something else for a couple days. So I think it really is the way that, for me personally, the book was written. They Were Her Property. So I can either, for this one I didn't rate, but I did not finish it, so I didn't rate it. But The Half That Has Never Been Told was rated really highly, because for the first time there was language put to what was done to American enslaved persons in a more powerful, impactful way. And it connected it to capitalism. And he used the language very particularly, like in forced labor camps and things like that. And he talked about how the world capitalized off of the cotton that was being produced in the South. And so many people like to distance themselves, like Northern people like to distance themselves from the slave South. But British banks, and there's so many people who were involved in that, and he did it in a way that really was engaging to me. There's another book that I read decades ago. I mean, I seriously, I can't remember when, but it has never left my mind, and it's called The Adventure of English, the Biography of a Language by Melvin Bragg. I've never forgotten this book, and I just remember being energized by listening to this book or reading it. And I just actually thought about it. I found a multi-part BBC thing on YouTube about it. I'm gonna watch it because I think I want to buy that book, because I'm like, you know what, I need to go ahead and buy that and have it on my shelf, because I have never forgotten that book for years. So that's a book that would get 5 stars for me. I'm, you know, if I'm decades later still thinking about it. I love the English language. I love how it grows and moves and breathes. I am not a grammar, what's the word that we should use other than the other one? I don't look down on people for the way they use grammar, because we are all coming at it in different ways, especially with English. English grabs onto so many other words. And, you know, when it comes to African American vernacular English, it is so interesting about how somehow we've retained the grammatic ways that our West African ancestors speak. I love how internet and youth slang comes into regular everyday English. It ends up in the dictionary. Like, literally, the way that we use it now is, it can be literal, like there is a literal plant behind me, versus I literally almost died, like or I literally died. That now is in the dictionary. I love the malleability of language, the adventure, the growth, the way it can just swallow up all these other loan words and make them ours. I love that. And it was so funny, when I was in college, I would take a class and immediately change and they were all social classes, humanities and social science classes. So I was never meant to make money, but every time I would take a class, I would just get so excited and change my major to it. And so finally at the end, I had to just kind of put together a whole bunch of credits and just come up with like, basically I had enough for a communications degree. Anyway, but I love anthropology and English and humanities, and all of that goes into language and stuff like that. And so if someone can take all of that stuff and make it interesting, you can give that a grade in a book, right? Now, if some idiot comes along with a nonfiction book, what's the guy, the bell curve one, that book can be challenged. You don't have to give that book a high score. Mein Kampf is, from all I've never read it, but from what I've seen about other people who have talked about it, they said the book is really not a good book. It's rambling and all that kind of stuff. So I guess someone could step outside of themselves, read the book and say, well, it was well written and it was charismatic, but obviously it's really hateful stuff in this book. But from what I understand, the book wasn't even good. So we can judge nonfiction books, especially if it's something we're interested enough in, especially if the book causes us to be interested enough to do further research and we find that, yes, what they said were true, you know, all those kinds of things. And so I wonder if there needs to be like a separate grading metric for nonfiction books. How and that would be difficult, because if you're not a anthropologist and you're reading some kind of book about, you know, groups of people, if you're not an evolutionary scientist and you're reading about evolution, if you're not a theologian and you're reading about the development of world religions or something like that, I guess it would be difficult to judge the truthfulness of the book. But if a book engages you, teaches you, seems to not have such an agenda, which I don't know if that's true, if that's good enough either, because teaching, Annette Gordon Reed, I think I had it right the first time. She wrote the Hemingses of Monticello, an American Family. A lot of people knew that the Sally Hemings story was true, but other people couldn't let go of their idealized image of Thomas Jefferson. They just couldn't believe that he would be having sex with this 14-year-old girl. And he had 6 children with her, and those people have now and there's a whole group of people who kept the oral tradition going, and they knew, and they all meet up and everything, and they finally did DNA, and they found out, yes, these are all Jefferson's children. And she did a very deep dive in it, and it was super interesting. And I never forgot the book. So I don't know if I don't know if that's something that makes a nonfiction book not be dry, is the fact that they never leave you. And in just regular conversation, it comes up, or I still think of it. I still think of Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow, especially right now because I'm doing my prison project, my prison abolition project. And because a lot of those books, a lot of the newer versions of those books refer back to Michelle Alexander's book. So I don't know. I don't know if I've come to a solution or a answer, but I really do think that we can talk about, maybe we can't rate maybe we can't rate I don't know. I guess I wonder if nonfiction books too, if it's going to be powerful to someone based on what their interests are. Because so for me, obviously, race, theology, language, prisons, what else? Like history, especially American history, from the lens of people who have not been looked at, like women, African Americans, Native Americans. So I wonder, I don't know if I have an answer, but I definitely rate nonfiction based on whether or not it can hold my attention. If it's dry, if they figured out a way to convey maybe their dry information. So I think you can, I think based on the enjoyability of, and the ability for the historian or the theologian or whatever to get across their information in a palatable, interesting way to keep your attention, I really do think that you can rate that. I mean, now I can't use, I just learned about the Kaw-Pow method, where I'm rating things based on intrigue and enjoyment and things like that. So I'm not going to be rating a nonfiction book like that, but I will definitely be rating the book on, can I understand what this person is saying? I heard someone recently, there's a Wisecracked is a channel on here on YouTube, and the guy who started the channel had a breakdown and left, and then he sat down and talked with one of his friends and had like a really long like visual podcast about what happened. And the person he was talking to was a philosopher who helped him with a lot of the behind the scenes stuff. And the guy said, if it doesn't matter if you're a philosopher, if you're the smartest person in the room, if you can't get someone to understand your concepts, then it's useless. You're useless. And I thought, oh, that's a great way of explaining what I was thinking about. So if like with so if someone is just talking to literally 5 people that's going to understand them, but not widening the, what's the point? What's the point of talking to 5 other people who understand your concept when, if you can't, dumb it down is a crude way of saying it. I just can't think of another way, and it's getting really hot in here without my air conditioning being on. If you can't dumb it down for the lay person who is interested in it to understand. So if the person who is writing something can dumb it down enough for me to understand it, and they can write it in a way that is engaging, but I still get that same information, and they provide me with enough outside information where I can go and try to compare other sources if I chose to, I think we can judge that as a 4 or a 5. And then if a book is just so dry and repetitive, or so in love with its own language, or trying to get across how smart it is, that book fails getting across its historical point, or its feminist point, or its theological point, whatever. So that could be a 2 or a 3. So I think you can judge a nonfiction book. I think you can. I think you just have to kind of look at what you're judging in a different way than what you're judging with a nonfiction. I hope that made any sense. I'm sweating, and it's time for me to get off of here and turn my air conditioning back on. At the end of this video's emoji be an owl for knowledge, and but that's only if you don't have anything to say. Let me know your thoughts on whether or not we need to rate nonfiction books, and what would your requirements be for a good or a bad rating for a nonfiction book. Be easy on yourself, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.